The first experience I have with healthcare that I remember is the doctor crying while she gave my mom the diagnosis of a long, scary word that I didn't understand. My mom was visibly upset, and I heard the words life threatening. The doctor seemed to have completely forgotten that I, the scared and confused 11-year-old patient, was in the room at all as she delivered this life altering news. I remember sitting there patiently waiting for someone to reassure me that I was going to be okay, but that moment never came. This is the first time that I realized that the healthcare system wasn't actually centered on the patient. Before this moment, my only experience of being a patient was for pretty quick and simple things. I had been to the doctor a lot over the prior year and a half, but at the time, it all seemed like unrelated problems. I broke a couple of bones and had casts put on. I went to the doctor a lot for different problems, and they asked a lot of questions that mainly my mom answered. I had strep throat a few times and took antibiotics. I had a lot of stomach aches and headaches. At this time, I was a competitive gymnast, and over the next year, I lost all of my tumbling skills. And eventually, it got to the point that I couldn't walk up the stairs or stand up off the floor on my own. I began taking naps all the time, which was really odd behavior for me, and I didn't even have enough energy to hang out with my friends. Even at this young age, I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't put it into words to help my parents or my doctors understand. A rash on my elbows, knuckles, knees, and ankles is actually what led me to the day that I was diagnosed. My doctor sent me to a dermatologist who took small biopsies of my knee and elbow. At the time, I thought that was some pretty serious stuff, but little did I know it was going to get a whole lot worse. A week later, I was in the room when the doctor tearfully told my mom that I had a rare life-threatening autoimmune disease called juvenile dermatomyositis. It is a vascular disease that causes all of the issues I had been having and more. Some of the main symptoms of my disease are muscle weakness, joint pain, severe fatigue, rashes on all my joints, as well as GI, heart, and lung problems. Getting my diagnosis was just the beginning of my experience with a lot of doctor's office visits, hospital stays, and many other treatments. Because of my disease, I take 21 pills a day, get admitted to the hospital once a month for 2 infusions, and I see 12 different doctors in 4 different states. Being a patient can literally become a full-time job. It is absolutely exhausting. Imagine trying to keep all 12 of these doctors on the same page. It is incredibly challenging to have to be the one to mediate between them, since at every single visit, they are always in a hurry or they're rushed. And on top of that, the majority of the time, I'm not feeling well. One of my least favorite things to do at every appointment is having to summarize my whole medical history onto a couple of papers that are attached to a clipboard. When I was first diagnosed, I had to fill out endless questionnaires and answer many of the same questions over and over again. When you take 21 pills a day, it is not fun to write those out every single time. I especially love it when they only provide you with a tiny line to write your medications on, like I can really fit all 21 of my medications onto a single line. Also with these visits, I get asked a lot about what has happened since my last visits, and I am constantly repeating the same exact information in multiple different ways. Because all of my records from every doctor are stored in completely isolated electronic medical record systems, the burden falls on me, the patient, to make sure that everyone is up to date on what is going on with my health. If my doctors don't have the necessary information they need, it can cause me to have to leave without answers, which also means that I have to come back once they are finally sent the information. Occasionally, the lack of necessary treatment or the necessary information causes them to make a different treatment decision than they normally would have if they had had it originally. On top of that, I have found the doctors and nurses searching for this information while I'm sitting in their office causes the scheduled appointment time to be completely wasted. And it can be completely distracting to find the time to discuss the reason why I'm actually there. In general, I have found that if I don't come in with specific questions and goals that I want to get out of the visit, I generally leave frustrated and I don't end up getting the help that I need. In order to have the information I need for myself and to share with my doctors, I have to spend a lot of my time filling out record request forms to each doctor after all of my visits. After I fill out these forms, they send me copies, and I always ask for them to be emailed to me, but they rarely follow my instructions despite it being allowed under HIPAA. They usually end up faxing them or mailing them to me. I have found that doctors really want the information that is found in the narrative part of the office visit notes or in the interpretation part of radiology or pathology reports. This is where the important information is. I have tried to use the patient portals to have access to my records and to manage my health, but when you see a lot of doctors who work in different health systems, you end up with a lot of separate portals that don't have the ability to connect to each other. I'm up to at least 23 different patient portals, all with completely different website addresses, usernames, and passwords. And they all have 23 different versions of my medical information. Most of them have missing or incorrect information. Only one of the 23 actually provides me with my office visit notes or radiology results, and very few of them even have lab results. None of them allow me to edit the information. When they do let me see the details, it does help because I can download the note or report myself, and I don't have to deal with all of those record request forms to get the documents. So to help with this, I started making a pre-visit summary before my visits. I keep a Google Doc and make a copy before visits. I add any visits that I have had with other doctors and copy their plan into the document. I add the questions and things that I want to talk to them about and write down the reason I am visiting them. I include my medical information, but I also summarize my recent visits and procedures so that it is easier to read than the really long medical records. I can also add in details from my perspective, such as how my pain levels are and other relevant information. I then attach the medical records that I have gathered from the record request process. I always include a cover page to make sure that they know that I want it to be reviewed ahead of time so that I can be sure that they have everything needed. Also, because I have a rare disease, sometimes I ask questions that need to be researched ahead of time. I start the report with basic information and the reason I am coming in for an appointment. Next, I have the items that I want to discuss at the visit. I use this to make sure that I don't leave before the things that I want to accomplish are done. It also keeps the visit more focused as the doctor knows how many topics there are. I then summarize the recent visits I have had so that I can share the relevant data. I mainly just copy and paste this part from part of the note where they type their plan. Next, I include my recent and ongoing diagnoses, allergies, and current medications, and I note which ones I want to refill for. Then I include any recent procedures or tests, functional issues and pain status, and finally a list of all of my doctors so that they can easily contact them if they need to discuss my care. I then attach the actual records that I summarized in the earlier part. Here are some examples of the records that I include at the end. What started out as an experiment has worked pretty well. So far, I have sent the report to all 12 doctors in ER and in urgent care, and I have modified it as I have gone on to make it work better for me and my doctors. My doctors and nurses love it. They ask how I did it, and I tell them I do it manually in a Google Doc. They say that they wish every single patient had this. My visits are so much more productive and effective when they have the information they need. It reduces my stress of trying to remember everything. It has also prevented me from having that feeling that I get when I'm on the way home from the visits where I forgot to ask something important. This is problematic when you forget something. It means that you have to start the long phone tag process with the office, which is never as good as the in-person conversation. My ask of you today is to make this process a lot simpler. I don't want to spend time requesting and summarizing records. This burden should not be put on the patient. Technology should be able to do this for me. Create my pre-visit summary in an automated way. I would love to have Fire pull the relevant information and let me add my issues to discuss at the visit and any other notes. Create triggers to send copies of records using Fire to patients and the providers the patient wants you to send them to, so that these out-of-date forms don't have to be filled out and faxed around so much. If you work on an app that accepts Fire messages, create a workflow that doctors and nurses like. I'm asking you to help make every patient's lives just a little bit easier.